All right. Welcome back to another episode of Clean Breakthrough, brought to you by Greenville Transitions. Today we have a guest joining us, an awesome guest that we go way back with. Her name is Amber Hollingsworth, and she is with Put the Shovel Down. That's her YouTube channel. But we go back with Amber almost 10 years, starting with in-person counseling, early intensive outpatient programming days, where Amber used to have an IOP for the Greenville community in Greenville, South Carolina. So very excited to have you on, Amber, and get into addiction recovery.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I feel like it's like a family reunion happening here. It's awesome.
Thanks for coming on, Amber. I feel like we should clap for our guests when they come on. We're like, hey, yeah, hey.
We need a soundboard too with like cheers and but well, let's go back to the early days and talk about how you even before Put the Shovel Down was even on your radar. Like what got you into passionate about addiction recovery and working with families? How did you start out?
I feel like, sort of like early in my counselor days when I was first in private practice, people would call me up and they would say, I want my son to see you. I want my husband to come there, but they just refuse to get help. They won't even admit they have a problem. And so I would start sort of talking them through on the phone about what to say and how to say it, how to approach the topic in a way that would get the person to come in. Like, for example, I would say, instead of saying, you have a problem, you need to get help, why don't you say, hey, I know we've been arguing about this a lot lately, and I've done a lot of things that haven't been helpful. How about we go and see if we can have someone help us sort this out, right? And so it's saying we have a problem. And that the person can usually acknowledge, because they're usually like, yeah, we do have a problem, a lot quicker than they're going to acknowledge I as in they have a problem. And so that's kind of the beginnings of this family model and the coaching of the families.
Okay. And so, well, you started doing that with Hope for Families, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. That was at the very beginning, Hope for Families. Yeah.
Okay. And then that was after you were a counselor at another facility.
Right. I was a counselor almost 10 years at an inpatient facility and did inpatient treatment, intensive outpatient, teenagers, adults. I did it all. You saw the most severe things there.
Yeah. And so you decided, you found that little niche and you were like, okay, there's a big need for this, the family model. You decided to break away and you started what's called Hope for Families in Greenville. And then you just started working with moms, dads, people of all ages.
Yeah, because the thing is, David, is that it's like the families are the ones looking for help. They're desperate. They're like, please, somebody help me. And everywhere they turn, they get told, there's nothing you can do. You're just going to have to wait for them to hit bottom. Basically, it's like they have to want it for themselves. Essentially, they're being told, just, step back, cross your fingers, and hope for the best. Well, as you guys know, if this is your child or this is your spouse, that's unacceptable. That's just not good enough. And when these families would reach out to us just being in tears, just being so desperate, especially when it was their child. There has to be something more that can be done than just hope they figure it out.
Yeah. And
it's almost like it reminds me of almost like an alternate intervention, where it's like, that's normally what I feel like precipitates intervention, is that a super unwilling person who doesn't want to get help, people around them that are like, they got to get help. And then you bring the interventionist in, and it felt like y'all just came up with a really creative way of kind of working with the family, working with the individual, addressing each need, and then kind of bringing them together to get that motivation where then they would want to do something.
Right. I think with a traditional intervention, I'm not against them. I think that there's sort of a right timing to do that. When someone is so addicted, like it's obvious, they're not really in denial. Maybe they can't stop doing it. But they're not functional anymore. They've probably run out of money. They're running out of options. You can sometimes back them into a corner and pressure them into treatment. And I'm fine with that, because as long as they're there long enough, their brain clears up enough. And then a lot of times they choose to be sober after that. I don't have a problem with that at all. But when you're dealing with someone who's still functional. Maybe they're still like going to school, or they're still holding a job, or, you know, maybe they're president of the PTA and running the house. And you're trying to convince this person that they have a problem so bad that they need to go to some sort of like big 30, 60, 90-day treatment or something. You might leverage them into doing it, but they will come back out and continue, because if they don't think that they need to stop, they're not doing what I call bargaining. And that cycle has to move through before someone's really just going to like stop. And so for people that are maybe not an end stage addiction, they still have some options left. I just don't think that old school intervention is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, one thing I always appreciated, because obviously like Amber trained me while I was still in grad school, and obviously worked with her at Hope for Family for years. She always like taught us to like look at it from a different perspective. Instead of like looking at it as like, hey, put this person on the hot seat, you know, make them change. Look at the system, look at the people, and where are the strengths. And like, you're very much like a strength-based approach, always have been for as long as I've known you. Like, how can we make somebody like take their superpowers, if you will, if you love, like, call them the superpowers, really tap into their superpowers. The family superpower is that the parents or the spouse is motivated for change to happen, to hopefully save somebody's life, and also save like the family's like well-being on some level. And I always like that always stuck with me, like, instead of looking at it from this like negative, like trying to force like a square peg in a round hole, like how do you accentuate the things that are really like willing and able to move, and then hopefully change can come out of that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, actually, because what I feel like what normally happens when you have a loved one who's struggling is you want to tell them, you're trying to get their attention and get them to see how bad it is. You have like an urge to shake them by the shoulders and say, what the hell are you doing? You know, you're ruining your life and ours, which is a valid urge, but it doesn't work. And so what we do is we tell them, we show them how they're screwing it up. We remind them of their mess ups. And so what we're telling them is we're telling them a story that they're the villain. They're not going to accept that. They're telling themselves a story that they're the victim, because they're a victim of you being mean to them. That's the only story they can hear in their head when you're trying to get them to see that they're the villain. And I like to sort of present a hero story to people, is like find their gifts, find their geniuses, find their passion, and get them to sort of see themselves as this person who conquered this big thing and accomplished this big thing. People will grab onto that identity so much easier than they're going to grab onto this identity of I'm the villain in the story.
Yeah. How do you, you know, when you're working with families, how do you help like the family members and the loved ones work through their personal resentments and even as a therapist, right? Like we get personal resentments, or like we're trying to help people. Like, how do you, any ideas on how to like work through that to be able to see this person's like potential, or like what to help them build to, like, sometimes it's hard to even see them as a hero.
Yeah.
You know, like any ideas on how to do that? Any thoughts on that?
You're going to laugh when I say this, but if you ask me that question, I would say you cram it down and you do exactly what I'm telling you to do anyway, because I'm going to say these words, these exact words at this exact time and in this tone of voice. Once you do that for a while, they start responding to you differently, and then the resentment goes away, because even if they don't stop the addiction immediately, they will pretty quickly start responding to you very differently. And then the whole relationship feels better. And then the resentments can go. I don't really know a way to make that go away and then do it. It's kind of like action before feeling. I'm like, just do it. Okay. And then the feeling will come.
Yeah. That also makes me think about back in the day, like when we would do, within the treatment team, like we would do like these lunches and like talking about the clients, and we would even be getting that feedback from the other people that we worked with about maybe try this way, somebody outside the situation that's not as like caught up with session after session with this client, or in the family, like somebody outside trying to offer a different perspective to try to like, hey, like just try it this way, just try and just see what happens.
Yeah, you want to go at it from a strategic, logical point of view, not an emotional point of view. You're not going to solve this emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, but it also doesn't seem like logic when you're in it and a counselor is telling you to do those things. It's like, why would I do that? Do you not get what my son is doing at home? He's a terror. I'm sure my mom would have thought like, oh, that model's never going to work.
Well,
And it just takes going through the motions.
It is a hard sell. And it not only is it hard to do that for them emotionally, but it feels very unfair to be asked to do that because they're already taking up all the slack, holding all the responsibilities, holding the whole family system together. And so to be told, now I want you to go in and be nicer, that's not, that can tick someone off to hear that, understandably so. So I like to say, what I teach isn't about what's fair, it's about what works. And so I'm like, you don't have to try it forever. Just try it this week. You will see a shift in their attitude towards you almost immediately. And then they'll start to see, gosh, it does work. Like they actually came to me and said they were sorry about what happened the other night. And they haven't apologized for anything in 10 years, like they start to see that it works and then it just becomes easier and easier.
Yeah. It reminds me of sports growing up where it's like a tennis coach would adjust the way I hold my racket just slightly. And it's like, this feels so unnatural and I don't like it. And look what it's doing to my tennis shot. It's screwing me up. And he's like, no, trust me. Let's just stick with it. Keep that angle, move it in your hand just slightly, a quarter inch. And then eventually it just took a while. And then you would start to see it paying off.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel awkward at first. It's unfair, all the things. Yeah.
That or like, have you ever seen, my feed has been infiltrated by what I can only call sing talk. And it's like these vocal coaches where someone will like not hit the note right. And these people who are incredible, obviously what they do, but it seems so goofy when they're doing it. They're like, no, do your mouth like this. And then say elephants bark, blah, 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 blah. Like they make them say crazy things. They do it for like maybe only 15, 20 seconds. And then they go, now do it again. And then they like nail the notes perfect. And the whole method feels goofy. They feel kind of dumb doing it or embarrassed doing it. It's always in front of a big crowd, but it works. And it's just that faith and trust and believing like, okay, this person's an expert. I'm just going to do what they say. And at least, or maybe they only film the ones where it works, but all the ones I see, obviously it works.
Yeah, I've not seen that, but I can track what you're saying. It's like a little adjustments similar to what David was saying about the tennis racket. It makes all the difference.
And people just have to be willing to stick with it long enough to see the results. But it's easy to want to back out before you see any results.
Right, because it goes against your instinct and it feels awkward and it feels unfair and it's hard. But when you see a little result, it'll motivate you to do a little bit more and you'll get there.
Yeah. Well, we would go ahead, Cole.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think a lot of times it's also because it's really hard. Normally the thing that we ask families to do, a mom, a dad, a husband, a wife, and I also get the feeling they kind of know somewhere inside of them to do that thing. And they've even thought about doing it, but it's just really hard. And it's like the one thing they don't want to do, whether it's dropping that resentment, treating them a different way, talking to them a different way for ego, vindictive, like whatever human emotions are popping up, then you're the one saying like, well, have you tried this? And it's like, ooh, that's the last thing on earth I want to do. The same way to the addict alcoholic. It's like, well, have you considered giving up drugs and alcohol? And they're like, that's the one thing I'm not doing.
I'll do anything but that.
Yeah, I'll go see Amber. I'll go see Cole. I'll go do whatever, but do not make me do that. So I feel like they're just so parallel, the family and the person struggling.
For sure, yeah.
Because we're asking for big change, and big change is uncomfortable for any human.
Right, that's right. One of the things I tell families, I think that helps them is that first, I say, I promise you, this is going to give you the best chances of getting your person to change. I promise, by far. But even if they don't change, you will walk away from the situation feeling completely wholehearted, and you won't have that, I call it guilt-resentment thing that you got going on right now, where you're resentful towards them, but then you feel guilty, but then you feel resentful that you feel guilty. You won't have that guilt-resentment anymore because you will know you conducted yourself in a way that fits with your values. You gave them every chance, every grace. You treated them with dignity and kindness. And so if it doesn't work, you're still going to come out of this a winner because you're going to feel whole. And if you don't do it this way and then you just have to sort of leave and it ends terribly, it creates this grief and this distress that just never goes away. Even if you like completely cut this person off, you're left with this horrible, like haunted feeling.
Yeah. It's also a really it's a very interesting like dynamic or dance to like get somebody to like take that like leap of faith, to try it for a week. Like,
Mhm.
any ideas from all of y'all, like how to like get people to buy into that, or like being willing to try something different?
On the family perspective or on the addicted person perspective?
Really either, but I think in this scenario, the family.
Right. A lot of it's kind of like what Lucas was saying. A lot of times when I'm explaining them what I want them to do and why, they're shaking their head along because they know internally that makes sense. Like positive reinforcement works better than negative. Like it's almost like common sense. It's just that the emotions get them away. And I think when they think about it, they know that that's the right way. Like they know inherently that their person responds better to these messages versus these messages. So it's not a matter of convincing them to do it. It's just a matter of helping them stay consistent with it because it is emotionally difficult. But I feel like inside they know that's going to work better.
Yeah, that's interesting. That reminds me of I can't remember who said, maybe it's somebody in grad school, or I read it somewhere, but talking about like, in this process of like trying to help people, you're not only just trying to teach them, but really what you're trying to do is help them remember. Like you're helping them remember these like fear and like control, loss of control had pushed away some of these like basic like human connection things that we've forgotten. And then like trying to help people remember. And that's what you're kind of saying. They're like, hey, I remember, like, it does feel better when somebody like gives me like validation on what I can do well. They give me hope that I can do things different. They say, hey, I got you. Like that feels good. And I remember
on
that
both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
I like what you said about the helping them stay consistent also, because that's something, just another place I see kind of the parallel roads going together, where like the person struggling when, shit hits the fan and the DUI, the job fires them, whatever. It's like, I got to go get help. I'll go to treatment. I'll do this. Then they get out and it's like, well, maybe it's not that bad. All this stuff that worked for them, they kind of stopped doing because it worked. So now they think they're good. And I've seen that same thing with families where they go jump into like 12-step kind of support groups or see a family support therapist in the crisis. And then once let's say it's their son goes to treatment. Okay, I don't know, I need to talk to them as much. Then when they get back from treatment, oh, I definitely don't need to talk to him. He's doing so well. And it's like, your work should be your work independent of whatever they're doing, that you're taking care of yourself.
Right. It kind of reminds me of like, it's very common advice to say, you have to change your people, like your playmates, your playgrounds, your playthings. Like you have to change the people you hang out with. Every family member knows that. Like I can't, my person doesn't need to hang out with these people over here because they're bad influences. The thing of it is if you send someone off to treatment and they come back to you and you're the same person you used to be, it's essentially the same thing. You're throwing them back in the same environment. Emotionally, this dynamic immediately begins to come back into play, but we don't realize that we're part of that system just as much, if not more, because if someone went to recovery and they're fairly solid in their recovery, the emotional fallout is going to get them, I think, to relapse faster than the using buddy is going to get them to relapse.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Like the big fight, the big thing or whatever. Yeah.
Just that it's a much bigger thing. But I think when it's the person and they're in my life, I want it to be all them. No, it's just them. They need to change. I don't need to do anything. They need to go to treatment. Now I get a break. And when they come back, there's nothing for me to do different. I mean, I just think that's very human at the end of the day.
Well, it feels insulting to be told over and over, you need to work on yourself. That's the language we use. You need to work on yourself. So the way I say it to people is I say, listen, you do need to work on yourself because you're crazy. But it's because they made you crazy. Okay. But let's just admit it. It's this addiction's fault that you are flat out crazy. You lost your mind. They're like, yeah. It's better than, because the other way it almost sounds like it's their fault the person has the addiction. And what I'm saying is when you live with addiction, it is crazy making. There's no way to live in that system and not like lose yourself. The gaslighting, the just all the things. Of course, you're going to lose yourself and your emotions are going to be dysregulated. And yeah, you do have to work on that. But that's not me saying there's something wrong with you. It's me saying you're being impacted by this situation.
Yeah. I think if they, like a counselor or a therapist, we do this for many years. We start to realize we become a little crazy. They're like, it helps to have empathy for the families. along with like, for me personally, like becoming a parent, I feel like I understand parents a lot more than I did earlier in my career. And having worked now with addiction for however many years, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it'll make me like second guess things, or I feel like I'm being gaslit. I'm like, man, I can totally get like how this happens living with the person. Cause this is just like my job. This isn't even like my family member. So
Right.
yeah, it's easy for it to happen. Have a lot of empathy for people who struggle with that, which is pretty much everybody who has somebody who has addiction.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to, I'm going to backtrack here. I'm always the one that backtrack.
Dave has an agenda. All right. We got
Keeps
to
us-
make sure.
I try to keep us on course.
Yeah.
So we talked about you counseling in the very beginning for a big treatment center, getting into Hope for Families. Now let's talk about, at one point you decided to transition over to like YouTube, social media, which I think was awesome. Like you could reach way more people, coach way more people, educate way more people.
Mm-hmm.
Some people thought you were a little crazy. You were doing it way before YouTube was even blown up. I remember, weren't you sending Cole out to buy lights?
Listen,
I
listen.
forgot.
Amber is always like,
Oh.
5 to 10 steps ahead. She's like, well, if there was just an app that you could just record yourself and put your stuff on there, and we could do some like graphics and stuff. Cole, see if you can find one of those, or maybe we could go like get some lights and we'll set up a studio and stuff. And now like everybody's doing a podcast, everybody's doing that. But back in the day, yes, I was going to Home Depot buying little like can lights with some like wax paper that we would paper clip around to make the lighting right, so it would look good for the. It was a whole thing, man. We were just trying. This is a while ago for sure.
What were you thinking, Cole? Were you thinking this is crazy?
No, I was thinking this is the adventure of the day. We're going to Hobby Lobby. We're going to the Home Depot. What are we getting into today? Okay, and then I would be like, oh my god, I've been on this like website trying to figure out the logistics of it for 4 hours. I don't know, Amber. I don't know. Maybe this will work. We'll see. Yeah. A lot of trial and error for sure.
A lot.
I can remember you telling me like 7 years ago, probably 6 years ago, you were like, hey, but you actually have a story. You lived it. You went through it. You've got to start recording, telling your story. And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to do that. And now everyone is doing it.
Yeah, you have the best origin story. I'm like, you got to capitalize on that, David. Like, you're missing out. Like, I'm so jealous.
Yeah. It took a while, but I finally came around. I saw a post not too long ago. It was like, I didn't realize when I formed an LLC or started a business that I was also going to have to be a YouTuber and a TikToker, because that's just where everything has gone in the past 5 years, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Like you just have to jump on board. That's so true.
Yeah. So do you even do any in-person stuff anymore? Or are you like all online?
We have a few people that come in person still to the office to see us that live locally. But we don't do counseling anymore. We only do like coaching and consulting. And the difference is that counseling gets a lot into diagnostic and treatment planning, and coaching is more, here's what I want you to do to solve this problem. It's a lot more directional, and what we do is very directive. I mean, it really isn't this whole, how does that make you feel? Let you figure it out. It's like, no, do these things, say these things, and here's exactly why. And so we do a lot of that these days, and most of it is virtual.
Yeah. And then I would imagine online is really broad, and like who you're talking to, who you're reaching, who you're coaching or directing. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. Like I have a client right now in Ireland. I've got one in England. I've talked to people in countries I've never even heard of, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know where that is on the globe. And I'm trying to like figure it out as I'm talking to them. Yeah. The good news is addiction is addiction is addiction. I don't care where it is. It's the same dynamic, the same predictable pathway everywhere.
I remember we got a call from Australia, and it was somebody that watched you and heard about us through your channel. And like, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what it would look like to do it. It didn't end up working out, but I was like, Australia?
Yeah.
It's like as far away as you could possibly. I don't think there's a further point on the globe you could go.
I know. I've got a couple people in New Zealand, and their time zone is like a day plus some hours ahead. And my brain cannot even do the time zone math. I mean, it's not like 3 hours back and forth. It's like a day plus some hours and minus some hours. I'm like, it breaks my whole brain open. I can't even imagine it.
It's 6 o'clock tomorrow there.
I know. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
I'm just laughing at the thought of your Tennessee accent being just spread around the world. You know, there's like some little lady in like Ireland logging on, and then there's like Amber's Southern accent coming through the speakers. It's really funny. Really
Yeah,
funny to think about that.
That's awesome. Well, and I also want to hone in on the name, the put the shovel down, which, you know, I would imagine you were directing that towards like, you don't have to hit rock bottom.
Right.
You just have to put the shovel down. Can you just talk a little bit more about how you came up with that and how that fits into your coaching?
Well, a big part of our mission is trying to help people before they lose everything. I mean, my thing is like, you don't have to burn every bridge. You don't have to hit bottom. Like you can look at your situation and say, yeah, I don't think I like where this is going. I think I'll tap out now. I think I've suffered enough. And we can be done with that whenever you want to put it down.
Yeah. So a saying I hear a lot, and where it really stuck out to me was in the show Euphoria. I don't know if you ever watched that HBO series.
I know what it is, but I've never watched it.
Okay. A lot of high schoolers struggling with addiction and sex issues. And anyway, it said several times in there, it's like an addict will never ask for help if they have options. They have to run out of options. So how do you think that line plays along with put the shovel down? Do you think that kind of same thing, you just have to help them run out of options and then they'll put the shovel down?
I don't think so. I disagree, because most of my clients that I see these days are very successful people and they got plenty of options. You know, I see a lot of business owners, a lot of doctors. I think I see more doctors than anything these days, lawyers, pilots. I mean, and these people have tons of options. So it's not that they ran out of money. It's not that they didn't have anywhere to live. It's, you know, when you can approach someone differently, there's always something, there's a part of them that wants to change every time. I don't care how cowboy they are. I don't care how they're like, I love it. I'm going to drink till I die. You know, whatever they want, the big talk, whatever they want to say. Yeah. There's something in there that they don't like about it. And if you can find it, it's like a little seed. It's their motivation. Then you can nurture that seed and it grows bigger and bigger. And that's how you get someone to like put the shovel down before they lose everything. There are ways to do it. You just have to find what their motivators are, how they see themselves, who they are, and lean into that instead of pushing against it all the time.
Yeah.
Something I remember you training us up on back in the day, Amber, was also recognizing like what asking for help looks like. That it's not literally just like coming hat in hand saying like, hey, I want to get help, or I know I need to get sober. Like realizing that that's not super realistic. And that people may be asking for help in a lot of different ways through behaviors or just a willingness to even go talk to somebody is like an asking for help. And so just kind of like letting go of some of that rigidity that we can go into it. We would think of like, okay, they have to hit rock bottom. They have to ask for help. They have to do it this way. Like that is more of like an anxiety function of like, I'm out of control. So I need it to look like A, B, C.
Right.
When really it's much more nuanced than that. I remember you telling us about that back in the day.
And it gets perpetuated. One of the things that's interesting to me is when people tell their stories, their recovery stories backwards, they don't remember it right. And the reason I know is because my career's been on the front end of all the stories.
Right.
And I'll hear even my people who I was there for and witnessed firsthand, and they'll tell the story. I hit bottom. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's like they rewrite their story because that's the way their sponsor said it. And that's the way their person said it. And so it's in their brain that that's the only way that it can happen. So they'll like literally rewrite their story. I'm like, dude, you got sober because your mama made you, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And then this happened, and then this happened, you know. But we rewrite the narratives, and it's bad because I have seen people come out, be doing really good, and then relapse because they start thinking about it one day and they start deciding, I didn't really go to treatment for myself. That must mean I didn't mean it. I didn't hit bottom. That must mean I'm not done. I'm like, are you what? Like they'll talk themselves out of it. Some kind of like placebo effect thing. I don't know, but it's wild.
I think earlier on in like late stage addiction, early stage recovery, I feel like there's such a fixation on like how people come in and it's really easy to compare and contrast. I'm kind of comparing and contrasting to see if I really should be here, because if these people are all worse than me, then maybe this isn't the place for me to be. And if they're all better than me, you know, and it took less to get them in the door, maybe it's not where I'm supposed to be. And then I think there is like a lot of weird like guilt and kind of comparisons around it of, well, that guy, you know, his wife died and then he went to prison for 6 years and then he found the Lord in a jail cell. Like, it's like this huge kind of crazy story where then mine feels very insignificant if it's, my mom sat me down one day and said it was either get sober or get out of the house, you know, and then told me to go to treatment, where it's just like, well, I'm going to feel embarrassed saying that story after that guy says his story, because people are going to be like, well, that's not as entertaining or good. So I find you can kind of rewrite like something to make it more interesting and have that kind of that hit to it.
Yeah. Because even other people in the recovery community, it's almost like you can't fit in if you don't have their same story. You know, they'll be like, oh, you're not really an addict. You never did heroin. Like, oh, you're not really an alcoholic. You just, you know, whatever. You know, like they almost like shame you or exclude you out instead of saying, man, I'm glad you figured this out before I did. Like, I sure wish I would have figured it out when I was in that phase, but we don't. We put these storylines on people that are not even true. You know, people say this whole thing about you have to want it for yourself. That's the dumbest thing. I'm like, no, I've never heard a reason that I didn't like. You can't give me a reason why you want to get sober I don't like. If it's because it makes your face break out and you don't want that, I like it. If it's because you're going to go to prison if you don't, I like it. You know, because if you think about it, there are things I would do for my family that I would never do for myself. So when someone says, well, I'm here for my wife because she wants me to, I'm going to lose my marriage, then I say, wow, you know, she must be some kind of woman to be worth all that. Tell me about your marriage. Tell me why you care about your marriage so much. Like, instead of this whole, well, you're not ready because you're not doing it for you. Which I don't know. I just don't quite believe in that. Or the whole, I want to get sober. I'm like, that doesn't happen.
No, I feel like it's a lot of revisionist history because it's like a point of pride, you know? And unfortunately, like a lot of comparison, you could kind of see like getting into substance abuse, like, where it's like, I'm at a party, I feel inferior or insignificant, so I need to drink to feel okay, or I'm bored, so I need to drink or smoke or whatever to feel okay. It's like this inverse of it's happening, or the same mechanisms are happening. Like, hey, just so you know, like I feel inferior, I need to make sure my recovery story is like this like crazy story, or I just let you know, like I did this all for myself. Nobody made me do it. It's just like, it's a little bit of like posturing that we can do as humans, you know, to try to build ourselves up when we really just feel insecure in a lot of ways.
Right. And it doesn't bother me on an individual level for someone to rewrite their story. I mean, however they want to remember it. Like I said, I haven't heard a reason I don't like. The problem is it sends the wrong message to the person listening to the story.
Yes.
Because they think they're not doing it right, or it's not going to work for them, or they didn't have this happen or whatever. And I'm like, that's the problem. So when I work with people, I'm like, specifically, now let's talk about how your story worked, because you're going to help someone else along the way. And let's remember it how it was, because I don't want you to rewrite this, because you're going to help somebody. I want you to be really good at helping them.
Yeah, that was always a lot of fun back in the day when we would run groups, serving up some humble pie to like one of our alumni or somebody who's doing really good. And then they come back in and they're telling their story to the people in the group. And this is pretty rare you get the opportunity to do this. We could do this in a therapy group with the rapport. But like, whoa, time out. That's not exactly how it happened. Let me serve up some humble pie. Here's what the real story was. Just for everybody in the room to understand it. Not only for this person to like, you know, try to like have a little bit of just humility, but for everybody to understand like that's not the full story of what was happening. So they don't feel so bad about their own situation.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It sends a wrong message, and that messes people up.
I think there's like a huge, like, there's a swimming pool worth a room of reasons that people get sober, but I find there's like a pretty small bucket of reasons that people stay sober. Like, I think that one, it tends to consolidate a lot, where there's a lot less reasons. It's like, because I feel so good and I have the best relationships with my family and my job's going great and I love how I feel. And it gets, and I think it's just, to me, it's kind of separating those two things, that it's okay. There can be so many different reasons why we initially get sober, but that we're kind of unified on the reasons why we stay sober. Right. And that those are kind of two
usually
different.
Do it externally, and then it becomes internal, right? Then we eventually we do it because it's better over here on this side. The grass is greener, and we stay.
Sure.
But that's not how we got over here on this side. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another thing I was thinking is that like it would be more likely that when I'm in treatment, someone says to me, like, "Oh, you just smoke pot, like you don't belong here." Then when I think about like my 12-step friends today, I could not imagine one of them saying that to a newcomer, to anyone ever, because I think that it's really born out of this insecurity of like, I'm only 2 weeks sober, you know, and I'm in this treatment that I don't want to be in. And I'll put this person down that they only smoke pot. And I do heroin, and I'm like worse than you and somehow better than you by being worse than you. Versus once people have security in their sobriety, there's more of just a supportive spirit there that's just like, I don't care how you got here. I hope that you stay. I really want you to stay and figure out whatever it is that makes you stay, because that's what's important.
Exactly. And there's not a bad reason. Any of it. I like it all.
No bad reason.
Having more reasons is better. You need kind of a bunch, because sometimes one isn't going to cut it one day or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess this would be the only part that I might disagree with, is that I don't know that you stay sober for someone else. Like, I think you can get sober for someone else, but I think at some point to stay sober long term, I think it has to be for you. There has to be some buy-in. Otherwise, if that person goes away, then you no longer have any reason to stay sober. But I think by that time it would kind of take hold in you.
Yeah, it does sort of transform eventually. But, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, I don't want to become that person. I don't want to be that kind of dad anymore. You know, so it's a lot of times it's not just black and white. It's a mix of things. But I agree. Eventually you stay sober because you realize it's better over here. Actually it's more fun, and actually you have more joy and happiness, and you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. Just get people to that point. It's the hard part.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest conversations I have with families who are calling in to do our transitional living, and they hear, or their son hears that, like, what? Guys stay with you for 9 to 12 months? You might as well tell them it's the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And I have to explain to the families of like, time is everything, especially when we're talking about a 23-year-old whose brain isn't even fully developed and they've been rewiring it with drugs and alcohol. And it takes time to fill up, as Campbell would say, that pride tank. And like, you've got to get to the place where you can see, oh, the grass is greener over here, and I do feel better, and I do have healthier relationships. And you're not going to get that in a week or 2 weeks or
no. So it's a matter of like healing the brain, right? And it's a matter of giving them time to rewrite their narrative, because it's not just I've been using drugs or whatever this whole time, but I've been convincing myself for all of those years that this is what I want and this is the better way. And literally looking at clean people and like judging them and making fun of them and thinking that they're lame. You've like programmed your thinking to be, this is where I want to be and this is what I want, and I'm willing to do whatever to have it. So it's not just breaking the habit. It's not just detox. It's deprogramming that, which takes a while.
Yeah. I mean, I was supposed to be the largest marijuana farmer in the state of Georgia because it was supposed to be legalized by now.
Yeah.
And my plan got wrecked.
Yeah. Campbell called it loss of dream, man. Loss of dream. Yeah. You gotta grieve it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a pivot question. Just because we have you here, Amber, and it's a little bit selfish, but I just think your perspective would be interesting. So today, I obviously feel like very sure, you know, just light years different than what I did 9 years ago about what we endeavored to do with Young Men Sober Living. But you were one of the first people that we interacted with after deciding to start a sober living, and we walked into Hope for Families and asked, you know, can we partner with y'all for clinical? And this is what we do, what we're trying to do. What were your initial thoughts on David and I? And Cole, you can speak to this too, because you were there. But just kind of initial thoughts on what we were trying to do in Greenville. I also look back and I'm like, we're like 20, I was like 27.
27 years old.
I thought I was so big for my britches, but I look back now and cringe, and it's just like, you're just like a little baby. You had no idea what you're signing up for. This is totally crazy. And I've learned so much along the way that I thought I already knew. And I'm just realizing every year that I don't know anything.
I mean, I remember feeling excited about it because we didn't have anything in Greenville like that. And at the time, we dealt a lot with, you know, young adults, people that age, you know, late teenagers, early 20s. And you need something different at that age than just, you know, like just like a regular sober living. What are they called?
Oxford House.
Oxford houses, right. Nothing wrong with that. but that's sort of community ran, and it's usually by a bunch of grown-ups who've, you know, been leveraged in and figured it out. And these young people, it's not just a matter of them getting sober. It's like they've not developed adulting skills yet. Like they're developmentally very far behind. And you guys handled a lot of that. It's not just getting sober, but it's like, you know, doing your chores, being responsible, planning to cook one meal a week, like being where you say you're going to be. Like it's adulting stuff. And young adults that have been using since, you know, early teens, sometimes they just haven't developed those skills. And I love the fact that you guys had that in the program itself.
We had Lucas said this very well a couple of weeks ago, because we had a family call in asking like the difference. Well, what's different between you and an Oxford house? And Lucas was like, oh, well, like with an Oxford house or one of these other communities that are just peer led or alumni led, it's like you're betting all your chips on just the milieu, on just the alumni of that program, where something like a Greenville Transitions, you're at least getting to divvy up some of those chips and be like, here's some chips that I'm betting on the milieu. Here's some that I'm betting on the staff that's there. Here's some that I'm betting on the clinicians that are there. Here's a few for the psychiatrist. So it's being able to like, did I say that right, Lucas?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think just being able to kind of hedge your bets rather than going all in on a milieu that's unpredictable and fluid.
Right.
And GTs is fluid too. And like, you know, 1 month, everyone's really motivated and in a great spot and rah recovery. And we all know that the next month, like the whole house could be, I hate this place sucks. I'm not being treated the way I want to be treated. I should be able to do this or that. Like we just know that it moves. And so to have at least some constant in there of like a staff, programming, structure, I think just gives you something to kind of hedge your bet with rather than just going all in on milieu.
Right, because even if, you know, the atmosphere ebbs and flows, the program is consistent.
Mm-hmm.
What we do in here and how we do it is very consistent, right? And it moves on, and that pulls people through it. You know, if you go into a program and you happen to go in when the atmosphere is not great, that's your whole treatment. Like that's it, because it's all based on just the peer part of it. So you need more than that, particularly with young people.
Yeah. That's what stood out. That's what stood out to me in that first meeting. I could tell that both Lucas and David were coming at it from like very personal places, but also were very serious about it. Like really wanted to make it happen. And it was also just exciting to like, they had lived in on some level in their own lives with their treatment experience. And they wanted to create almost like a fun, like a sober fraternity house, you know? And that was also right in the wheelhouse of the clients that I typically worked with at that time. Even though Amber stole the first guy and like the first GT guy ever, Amber stole him from my collective.
I was forgetting about that. You just said it. I did. I'll own it. Yeah. And I don't feel bad about it either.
You shouldn't feel bad.
I'm glad I did.
It was a nice.
Him.
Yeah.
He was a good one.
Funny story really quick. I just remember
funny.
going in there, like Lucas and I were going in there to tell you guys like, hey, this is what we want to do. We want to partner with a good, solid clinical program that can provide therapy, IOP for these guys. And I remember somewhere in there, you were like, well, where did y'all even come from? What were you doing? What was your background? We kind of
you have to let me explain this because I was just about to say it.
Go for it, Lucas.
Sometimes in life you get burned so hard by a person that like 9 years later you could be taking a shower and think of it. I think of this every probably 3 or 4 months and just feel incredibly humbled by it. But in there, I was like, I think it was Campbell. I know it was Campbell. Campbell's the one who burned me. I just don't know who asked, but someone asked like, well, what were you doing before this? And I was like, well, my whole life I've spent in construction. And she said, your whole life? What are you, like 27? And going in there with like the plan that I had, what we were going to say, what we do, all that was not part of the plan. I had no idea what to say to it. And that's a burn that still stings to this day.
Rumbled when we got back in the car.
Oh man. I was like, God, why did I say it like that all my life? She's right. All my life is like 10 years. And to her, that's like a joke, you know? So I'm just like, oh yeah, that one still gets me.
Well, one other direction I wanted to go while we have you on, Amber, is, you know, we work mostly with just young men, ages 17 to 28. That's sometimes we go older than that, but that's, or I would say our average age is like 22. And we work with the families. You work with all ages, all over
Mhm.
the world, male, female. Do you notice any like big differences in a path to recovery for, say, the 65-year-old alcoholic versus the 22-year-old who we're working with?
I mean, yeah, there's a world of difference. A lot of these adults that I see, you know, maybe their addiction happened later in life, and so they do have a lot of things going for them. And so it really is just a matter of making the decision. For young people, it's just so many more layers and so much more complicated than that. And I mean, if they're teenagers or even if they're 20 somethings, but they've been using since they're teenagers, which means they're emotionally teenagers, they don't have the foresight and they're making a decision they can't even possibly understand the decision that they're making at the time and the ramifications and what it means and how that's going to play out. So you're really it's an uphill battle with young people. That doesn't mean it can't be won because it can. The first thing I did in this field was deal with teenagers. I say once you can do that, you can do any of it because that's the deep end of it right there. They can be reached, but there's a lot more things that have to happen.
Yeah. I remember as we were starting like the office and stuff, we had guys coming over and helping us and kind of mentoring us. And he was like, "Are you sure you want to do young guys specifically?" He was like, "I love the 60-year-old man in sober living. He just wants to get off of work, come home and watch TV, and he's good for the night."
Mhm.
But an 18-year-old, there's a lot more that needs to happen for an 18-year-old or 25-year-old throughout the evening when they're done with work to like just feel okay. And
Yeah,
sometimes some crazy stuff goes on in our houses.
exactly. In my experience, most of the adults that we deal with actually are able to get sober without ever having to go to treatment. Most of the people I see get sober, they never have to go to treatment. If they're younger, they almost always have to go to treatment because they need the structure and the regulation, like I said, to develop those just skills of being a functional person, not just the decision for sobriety. And so, in my experience, most of them end up needing some treatment.
Yeah,
That's a wild thing. I hadn't really thought of it, but that does make a lot of sense. Like the adults, like being able to do it without going into treatment. Are you surprised to find that like this many years in, like kind of reflecting on that and being like, if they have enough support and education that they can do it, is that surprising to you at all?
I think it was a little surprising to me when I kind of realized that because on a lot of the videos I say, not everyone goes to treatment. Research shows that most people get sober without going to treatment because there's this idea of you have to get help or whatever. Like even people get sober without even seeing a counselor even. And so I say that a lot. And then I would find myself talking to parents of like a younger person and I'd be thinking they need treatment. And then I realized like, oh, this is the pattern. Like,
Yeah.
most likely if they're in full addiction and they're, in that young age and they've been using since a really young age, it's more than just they need to make the decision. With adults, it's more just they need to make the decision. Yeah.
Yeah. And as an adult, like you said, they already have so many, typically, especially the ones you were describing who like maybe realize they have an addiction later on. They may already have like the job, the church, the marriage, family. Like there's enough like infrastructure in place to lean on while making that big change. Whereas when you're a young person, it's just like got kicked off your sports team, don't even go to the same high school anymore. Like it's just way more like chaos and just floating around.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like young people, I'll at least speak for myself, but I see it a lot. It's like I didn't have anything to lose, so which is kind of a dangerous thing where it's like you can't take anything from me. Like I don't have anything because I never built anything up because addiction was in the story from 15 on versus, someone 60-year-old that's like, I got grandkids, kids, a business, a wife, friends,
a mortgage,
church, a mortgage, like all these things. Like there's like real stuff on the line. Like if I don't change, I could lose a lot.
Right. I'm glad you said that, Lucas, because I've been talking about that in some of our programs recently about how this idea of hitting bottom, there's a sweet spot of consequences that you want. There has to be enough to be uncomfortable, right? We need to get the scale has to tip for sure, before someone's going to change. But once those consequences get so high, it becomes a lot less likely that they're going to make it because several things happen. One is once they've lost everything, like Lucas said, like there's nothing left to leverage.
Yep.
They've lost their kid, they've been to prison, they're homeless or whatever. And they get used to that. Like, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to kick this person out. Let's say you kick your, 22-year-old out because they're doing whatever. And you think that's going to make them stop. It's not going to make them stop. And if they do end up homeless and then they stay homeless for any period of time, then they're going to be like, I can do, like, it's going to be normal. And now you don't have anything to leverage. So I feel like there needs to be some consequences. But once you get past a certain point, it's very hard to bring people back from that level. It's harder, I think.
Yeah. That kind of takes me back to when I said an addict only gets help when they run out of options. Well, everyone has a different definition of their options that are available to them. Like, if you would have asked me early on before I went to treatment, my options were like, okay, I'm going to go to treatment. I'll do it. But if it doesn't work, I'm going to kill myself. Like, that's my only other option.
Mhm.
There is no in between. But I wasn't considering like, well, you could still use and just move out from your mom's house just because she's holding the boundary. Like, that wasn't a real option. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I need my mom's financial support. Are you crazy? I'm not
Yeah.
going to lose that. And then I remember like working in the industry. I was managing a transitional home in Asheville, a transitional living for young men. And one of the guys there, he was like 20 years old, left parents' house. He had been hopping trains all over the country, living in homeless communities, like flying signs to get his drugs. And I was like, well, his bar for options that he had left for him, that was a lot lower of a bar than I was willing to give myself. Like, he was willing to just go closer to that bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where David's superpower of being bougie saved his life. Is that right, Amber? Did he?
It's a standard of living, okay?
David had a high
Right.
standard of living, and that saved his life. How about that, David? Good job.
I think the reality is that it just does vary so much.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
I feel like I've worked with a guy that the parents talked about taking away his cell phone, and he's like, I'll do anything. All right, I'll go to treatment. And then I know ones that, they threaten like, hey, we're going to kick you out of the house. And that did work because they were like, had like a pretty nice status of living, like with their parents, to where, and they would never say that. They're always like, all right, fine, I'm out of here. You think this is something against me? And then normally like one day later, they're calling, they're like, all right, what's that place? I'll talk to David. I guess I'll go, because it's like the realities of that life hit them and they're just not prepared for it. But some people, I feel like, to your point, do adapt and they're like, I'll just make this work. And they do. And that becomes a very dangerous thing where then that's the new standard. And it's like, well, how do you pull them out of that?
Yeah. I mean, look at all the people in California. Like, I have parents that I talk to whose kids live in California, and they're like, it's terrible. They love it. They're comfortable. They think they're just hippies and they're just in the sunshine. Like, they're literally not even unhappy out there on the street. They're like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I don't know. It's true.
Yeah. And the progression is crazy too. There's a guy I went to high school with, and in high school, he was like football player, clean cut, looked great. He was on that show, Soft White Underbelly. Maybe 5 or 6 years later, and he was being interviewed as like a homeless drug addict that walked the streets of California, collecting cans so that he could pawn them at the end of the day. And he looked like unrecognizable to me. And then I think it was maybe 3 years after that, I heard that he had passed away. And so that's, high school athlete to literally not even here anymore, and probably like 9 years. And it's just how quickly it goes. And that guy that I saw in that video, like, I just did not even recognize. I feel like I couldn't have talked to him or gotten him to do anything. Just so different from the guy I knew in high school. And even a little bit after that, seeing some drug use, but not to that extent.
Yeah. Just not the same person at all. Wow.
Yeah. Once it becomes that, it's like, how do you reason with that person? I mean, the mind starts to go, quality of life being that low. Are they eating well? Are they sleeping? Like, all these things that impact your brain and decision making, it's kind of all out the window. It's really tough.
Yeah. So there really is sort of a sweet spot, I think, that's optimal. Got to be uncomfortable, but once once someone loses their kids, once someone's been to prison, like for real, it's just hard to come back from that. Not that it can't happen, but it's harder to pull people back from.
Yeah.
I feel like after the the fentanyl crisis really changed that a lot too. because there was just like less of a risk. Like you could, I think you could let people try to feel those consequences, but then when fentanyl came into the mix and it became so lethal, it was like, man, we got to this sweet spot has shrunk. Like we have to be much more like mindful of that.
Right. We may not have years to let them figure this out and
exactly.
Maybe hours.
Because it's Russian roulette, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
No, I love that a lot. So you may not have to run out of options, but you do have to feel some friction.
Right. And then so that's sort of one piece that gets you, right? And I think there's this other thing where you have to like know that there's not a loophole for you. You have to have tried all the bargains, right? You have to like have ran through this course of trial and error and let me cut it back and let me just use this drug and not that drug and let me just use on Wednesdays and all of the different things. Once someone's ran through that, then they have a pretty good idea of like, I can't manage it, as in like do less of it. Like I have to like pick. I feel like that's another essential piece of the formula for like the long-term sobriety thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helping somebody see like the unmanageability of what they're doing and giving them some onus of control. One of the guys that we worked with the family and he went through GT, I remember him and we put him on a marijuana maintenance plan. And we're like, all right, buddy, like let's try this and like see if you can stick to it. And of course, he bombed out of it immediately, ends up at GT. And I remember later talking to me like, did you think that plan was going to work? I was like, nah, I didn't think so. But you had to figure it out, you know?
Right.
Like you had to figure it out. And he could,
to be clear, real quick, the marijuana maintenance plan was not while he was at GT. We don't do the marijuana maintenance plan.
Not while he was at
GT that led to GT.
Yes, he did
Good
that.
catch.
Yeah, this was before I was at GT at all. This was when I was just being a therapist. And then he bombed out of his marijuana maintenance plan, ended up at GT. Yes. 100%.
But it's so important to let that show. If he had been forced to GT before that, that was going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of before, after. If you can get it to happen before and they've tried it, and honestly, you usually got to let them try it a couple times. Because it'd be like, well, I just fell off because that one thing.
Yeah.
Like it's going to have to fail multiple times
Yep.
for them to really decide like, no, there's no loophole for me. You know, I'm all in or I'm all out.
Yeah.
And we do the same thing at GT. Like the biggest area I can think about it is with jobs, where we give them 2 weeks and we say, all right, these are like the kind of small parameters of like just a couple little guardrails up on what kind of job you can get. You go do it your way. And we don't police it. We don't really manage it or anything. And then after 2 weeks, we say, all right, now we're going to try it kind of more our way. And we just slowly increase that pressure and kind of structure around them. But then that way they have the excuse of like, well, hey, or we have the excuse of like, we let you try it your way and it wasn't working, but we did that first. So now can we do it our way? Whereas if we just started with our way, they would say, well, you never even let me do it my way. And I would have gotten this job and I would have gotten that job. But once
it lingers in there.
Yeah.
So like it could work, and you have to let someone. One of the skills that I teach family members is to say, you know, when their person says, well, I just want to drink beer, not liquor, whatever their bargain is, I teach family members to say, okay, great. That sounds awesome. I think actually that would make a big difference, right? And then let them try that. And for goodness sake, whatever you do as a family member, do not help them. Like, do not, when they break their rule, don't go up and say, well, you said you were only going to have 3. Like, don't help them. Like, let them set the rule.
Yep.
In fact, whatever they tell you is reasonable. If they say, as long as I don't have more than 3, you give them 4. So that when they cross that line, there's no question about it. It has to be their line. I teach families, I'm like, I don't care what line they set. I don't care if it's a gallon of vodka a day. If it's alcoholism, it'll cross the line. Okay. So you let them set the line, you give them some extra wiggle room, because if they just agree to some rule that's your rule, when they cross it, doesn't mean anything to them because they thought that was stupid and they never intended to do it anyway. But when they set this for themselves with extra cushiony room and they cross it, then they see so clearly. And I usually tell family members, say, let's try it this way. And if that doesn't work, then would you consider doing this? That's sort of preset. So like to get us moving along these stages of change.
Can you imagine there being some wild mama out there that's like, their son's like, I'm only going to like smoke 3 times a day, and then she just gets like a whole like plate of marijuana and just like walking through the house like, you sure you only going to do it 3 times a day? You sure? Like, we got to make sure, you know, like just so you can like There's no telling. Somebody might have done that.
That's the way Campbell was when I was telling her this. She said, "Can I just leave the pills on the coffee table?" And I said, "Let's not go that far." Like literally, she said that. I was like, "Bring it back.
Bring it back.
Bring it back." You know, you could get some trouble for that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question, Amber. How do you, doing this, all these conversations, all these, people with various levels of success, ultimately, I guess, are defined by them. But how do you, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay engaged with the work? Like, how do you find that?
I feel like for me, it's all about keeping my personal expectations in line. Like, whenever someone comes to see me, my thinking isn't, I have to make this person quit whatever they're doing and forever, because then when they relapse, it's a statement about my competency. And then I get dysregulated, and then I start coming at them in a way that's not effective because I think it means something about me. My job when someone comes to see me, in my mind, is to make sure they have a really good experience talking with me, because then they'll come back, right? And they'll come back for another session. Or that they had a really good experience and maybe they did good for a while, but then they relapsed. Then they're not going to be worried about stepping back in to see me or someone else because they had a good experience. My job is to make the relationship a trusting, influential relationship. And that is within my control. And then also, I know that this learning process is in place. So when people are doing that, let me do just this or that, it doesn't bother me. I'm like, great, let's do it. Let's check it off the list. Bargain number 1, bargain number 2. And then I don't get upset when it happens because I see it as a sign we're moving along. I see it as a stage of change and not as a, this isn't working thing.
Yeah. So just that thing really, like tethered to your mission, your like mindset of going into it of like, this is kind of like what my objective or my purpose is in this, and just staying very connected to that.
Right, because otherwise, the burnout rate for addiction counselors is like 5 years. And I'm like, dude, it takes longer than 5 years to become one. Like, that is crazy. You're still paying for your student loans way past, and you're not even doing it anymore, yeah. But that's because you feel like this doesn't work. These people don't want help. And you feel like you're beating your head against the wall. When if you just change what you view as your job, then you actually leave pretty satisfied, feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I think they call that the wisdom to know the difference, right? Something like
the
that.
wisdom to know the difference. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, and just not being attached to the outcome, like believing in the process enough to not be attached or just waiting for the outcome or have expectations around the outcome. Because we see that all the time where we work with guys and maybe it doesn't end well, they relapse or something like that, or they leave and then they relapse shortly after. And some of them we'll hear from years later and they're like, oh, I got right back on the wagon because I knew what to do. Based on what I did with y'all. I knew how to go to meetings. I knew how to get a sponsor. You'd be surprised to hear that I make my bed every day now. I do all my house chores. Like, they always throw that kind of stuff back in there. And they're like, and I learned that all with y'all. So I just think there's sometimes when it doesn't feel right and I'm feeling frustrated, I just need to pause and zoom out and realize that timeline is going to be bigger than like right now in this moment. And there may be something around the corner that is really, really great that then I'll feel awesome about.
Right. It's like to trust the process. I like to say, once someone has found real recovery, they can't unhave it. You can't unknow it. You can't forget it. Like, this whole start over thing is not a thing. Like, you can go back out there and do what you're going to do, but it's like this little ghost of yourself haunting, because now you're not ignorant anymore and you know what you're doing. And you're literally, it's like a narrator narrating your life, being like, you said you weren't going to do that again. You know what's going to happen tomorrow. And it just bothers you until you get back to recovery. Like, you won't enjoy it anymore. Once you've really had it, like you really knew, like you had that spiritual shift or whatever. Yeah.
A head full of recovery and a belly full of alcohol don't mix.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on time here. Is there any final thoughts before we end it?
How did we do on your agenda, David?
I thought it was great.
We somewhat stayed on it.
Yeah, we hit the topics.
Okay.
We didn't go on too many side quests. I thought it was good.
I'm impressed.
Well, Amber,
accomplished.
Thank you again for joining us today. Will you say, like, how do people find you?
Sure. You can find me. YouTube is the best place to find me. It's called Put the Shovel Down, as in you don't have to lose everything. You can be done. Put the shovel down.
Awesome. I would highly recommend going to check it out. It's an awesome channel.
Yep. Thank you so much, Amber, for the time and all the wisdom. and guidance over the years. We really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
this was fun. Little family reunion. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good time. All right. And we're out.